Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. How the heck are you doing and holding up during this pandemic and this just crazy topsy-turvy time that we're living through? I'm going to keep saying that until the world is back on its feet again, at least in my estimation, and the people around me think that. This is a really great episode with Kelly Vance, and Kelly is a listener of the podcast. She ended up taking the online HSP course, and she reached out to me a couple of times, and we talk about that, and she sent me some feedback about the course after it ended, and I asked if she'd be willing to come on the podcast and talk about it. What I think you're really going to appreciate and enjoy about Kelly is she's incredibly candid about things, and she does her own work and she's done her own work. And one of the things, we didn't talk about this much in the episode, but she often will say, let me sit with that. Let me see how that lands with me. I mean, those are my words. And I like her because she says the same things that I do. That's not where I'm coming from. But I have a deep appreciation for her ability to sit with what feels uncomfortable so that she can sort it out. And in this episode, she talks about how her own language about being a highly sensitive person was impacting her and that she really realized that she's responsible for her own feelings. I just really have a great appreciation for her insight. I always have this sensitivity, like I feel like the mother hen to the people that take the course. And so I wonder if other people are wondering, why didn't they get chosen? And do I have favorites? And I don't. I guess I'm explaining because I must be having some feelings about this. In the last course, the last email that we send out has a list of questions to reflect on that we talk about at the end of the course, because I think it's really important for people to name what's changed for them. And if we don't talk about it, we don't recognize how much we've grown. And so Kelly is the first person ever who's actually answered all of the questions, and she sent it to me. So there's a hint for you in the future if you want to be on the podcast. I probably shouldn't even say that. I made a mistake. We recorded on a Thursday, and I told Kelly I didn't need her bio by Sunday. And when we sat down to record, I realized that I need the bio to read when I do the intro, which is what I record as soon as we finish the interview. Kelly's okay with it. If you want to read her bio, if you want to get to know more about her, we talk about some episodes in this podcast. Everything is in the show notes. And if you're listening on a podcast player, you can scroll down and see if the show notes are attached. Or you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com, go to the podcast page and click on this episode, which should be episode 84. I'm always afraid to say that in case something changes, but that's what the plan is. Go to the one with Kelly Vance. And at this point, I'm not even going to say that. Yeah, this is my COVID brain. Welcome to COVID and my brain. In this episode, Kelly shares her experience. My gremlins are going off. Like I just said that. I want to cut it out. Done is better than perfect. I'm going to model imperfection to you. I do think that you're going to enjoy this episode. I don't think I'm going to say anything more about it. Obviously, my brain's not functioning at its peak today, so we're just going to go with it. If you are open to rating and reviewing the podcast, it really does help. There are links in the show notes that show you how to do that. And what else do I need to say? I think that's it. I am going to come on at the end and I will tell you more about the course where you can get more information if you're interested. Even if you're not interested in taking the course, we talk about some of the themes that I'm seeing in coaching and therapy with my clients, things that are relevant to HSP. So really, I do want people to know how powerful these courses are. And I also think that they're valuable as a listener, that you can glean what people struggle with, how to make some changes. So I think that's it. I really feel like I'm rambling and my gremlins are really up. So done is better than perfect. And now, on to the show. Hey, Kel, welcome.
Hello.
I'm glad to have you here today. Are you a little nervous?
Yes, definitely.
Totally normal. Totally, totally normal. So you just took the online HSP course. Today is Wednesday. We're recording. Monday was the last day. And I have feedback questions and you filled them out. Nobody ever does. So thank you. And I just, I just loved what you had to say. And so I asked if you'd come on and talk about it. But I think what I want to do is back up and talk about when I recorded bonus episodes 73 and 74 called How to Heal When We're Blindsided. And then bonus episode 75 was Regrets, Healing, and How to Imperfectly Set Boundaries During COVID. I said, I'm not sure that I'm going to keep up bonus episodes 73 and 74 because I just wasn't sure about it. And you reached out and you sent me an email, and that's kind of how we initially connected, or that's how I connected with you. Do you remember what was in that? Because you didn't know what we were going to talk about today. Do you remember what was in that email?
I believe I was responding to that episode about being blindsided, and I loved how raw and genuine you were with your process. And you always think that therapists are going to be so neat and tidy with everything that they do. And so it was really refreshing and beautiful to see your process as you worked through this. So I wrote to you and told you that I thought you had mad lady balls for publishing that.
And I had no idea that mad lady balls were even a thing.
I don't think they are a thing. I think I made that up.
So we've exchanged a couple of emails since then, and I always sign them now, MLB Mad Lady Balls. If you do coaching or therapy with me via my platform, Simple Practice, it says Patricia, AKA Mad Lady Balls. Nobody has ever asked me what that means.
It's so sad. Someone should ask.
Maybe they're afraid.
Maybe.
But I mean, what I loved about that was it really spoke to, I see the vulnerability and I do my best recording when terrible things happen and I'm feeling raw and vulnerable. I feel really blessed that I have this ability to articulate what's going on. And I think it's an appropriate way, but because it's so vulnerable and I'm in it, I often have doubts about like, ooh, was that too much? And so just getting your beautiful email and then just that clip of Mad Lady Balls, like it's just so powerful. I love that.
I'm so glad.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we had a string of really inappropriate emails with graphics, which we're not even going to talk about, but it was quite delightful and a little embarrassing and a little uncomfortable, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the irreverence.
Yay. I'm so glad.
Yep. Anything that brings laughter, especially during COVID, is a very welcome treat. I'm curious to know, what was your reason for taking the course?
I took the course because my high sensitivity feels like a tool that I have to carry around all day, every day, and I don't feel like I know how to use it very well. I feel like it's heavy, it drags on the ground. I feel like I make a mess with it more often than I use it properly, and so I wanted some specific direction on how to take these qualities about being a sensitive person and make them more positive instead of negative.
Really, my experience has been that generally coming out of the group after the 10 weeks, it often takes people a couple months to really see how much they learned and what they've integrated. That honestly, to interview somebody right after the course isn't always. I just think it takes time. And I think the process of absorbing is kind of so natural. So we may revisit this at some point. But going into it, knowing that you wanted some tools for this heaviness around your sensitivity, any thoughts about where you're at with it now that the course is finished?
The big thing that I got from the course was seeing how much of my own language was impacting the difficulty that I was having with sensitivity. I needed to get in front of the filters that said I needed to be like everyone else and work on everyone else's schedule. So taking the class has been an exercise in recognizing I'm really responsible for a lot of the heaviness that I feel because I'm putting it on myself.
That's just beautiful. We haven't talked about what we were going to discuss. So every time I ask you a question, I'm always like, it's okay if you don't have an answer. Do you have an example of what that looks like? Just because it's a beautiful concept, but I love tangible things.
When my feelings are hurt, I noticed, and this is part of the course, was to sit back and just notice and not intervene. When I would have hurt feelings, I would notice, I would immediately try to shut them down and talk myself out of them. I would think I did that, but then I would feel resentful later. And I never really understood why, because I followed the program and I didn't get my feelings hurt and I didn't speak up. So why am I upset later? So getting in front of that and being able to see you're contributing to this, you're saying that the way that you're processing isn't okay, you need to do it a different way. And doing something so unnatural, I think, is what was making me upset and resentful.
Yeah, I think often we've gotten that message that how we react or respond to things is not okay. And so we learn to just bottle it up. And I recently had a situation where I had to have a really difficult conversation. And because the nature of this conversation, somebody felt like I wasn't seeing them, that I kind of put on that part of me that wanted them to be seen. I didn't speak my truth in it. And when we were done having this conversation, I experienced something very similar to what you're saying, where it's like, wait, I didn't speak my truth because I have this idea that, people can tell me anything and I can be open. And it kept me from going like, ouch, that didn't feel very good. And, this doesn't feel comfortable. So I did end up going back into the conversation and saying what I needed to, but you really articulated that beautifully. And I think that when we know that whatever feelings come up for us are okay and we can trust that, the reactivity, I think, often needs to be taken outside the relationship if we're having a lot of reactivity, because it's not often helpful for the relationship. But when we honor those feelings, whether that's in or outside of the relationship, I think it just gives us so much more room to feel like my anger, my frustration, my disappointment, my sense of being not seen and heard, like all those things are really okay.
I think not verbalizing where you are is a really good way to get stuck. And that's kind of what I've learned. This is if I don't take the time, and even if that's, a couple of days, to figure out what I need to say and what I want going forward, at the end of things, it's not going to be done for me. I'm not going to be finished with it or over or feel okay about the resolution. I'm going to need to go back and fix it.
Right. One of the themes that I've noticed coming up this week with my clients is, I feel like we're getting off topic, but I think this really relates, is oftentimes, like if you and I are in a relationship and there's something that's going on that I'm unhappy with, but I don't like conflict. I don't want to deal with the unknown of what might happen, that I find ways to suppress it and manage it with the idea that I'm keeping peace, but I'm really feeling resentful and it's impacting my energy and it's taking a lot of the life force from me. But the story I tell myself is this is what I'm doing to keep the peace because I don't like conflict. And we don't take that leap to have a difficult or uncomfortable conversation and know that we can work through it and see what's on the other side, which may be a lot more freedom and relief. And we just kind of stay stuck. And what I heard you say is the importance of naming what's going on. And that honors it for us. I'm feeling it. I'm thinking it, whether it's right or wrong. This is what's going on for me. Does that feel like that's an accurate reflection?
Very much so. It's hard to always be the troublemaker. And I feel like I'm always the troublemaker because I have feelings and I have things I need to discuss. And in most of my relationships, I tend to be that person, and that gets a little hard.
Well, and even there, I would really invite you to look at the label of troublemaker, that you've decided that having feelings and seeing things is a problem. And I attended an online women's group this last Sunday, and I spent a lot of the time trying to assess, like, are these people that I would want to hang out with? I'm really looking for communities that I feel like can support me. And like, do I fit in? Do I belong? And then it came time to share, and I kind of didn't want to share. And so I shared. And I just talked about, like, I'm really trying to assess, do I fit in? I had this really longing to fit in. And then I talked about a recent situation where I was kind of dreading it. And I ended up having this amazing time. And I felt really embarrassed that my brain did not even register that this would be something that would be nurturing and fulfilling to me. Like, I saw it as a duty and an obligation. And after I shared, previous people had shared and nobody had responded. And after I shared, like, the next 4 or 5 shares were in response to that, resonating with people that, like, I want to get together. I have ambivalence. I hope they cancel. Then they don't, then they're late. And then that disappointment that they didn't show up. And, and then they show up and having a really satisfying time, that ambivalence that we often go through around connection. And I reminded myself, like, every time I speak my truth, it resonates. I'd say for the most part, I'm the person that says what everybody's thinking, but nobody has the courage to say. And so instead of seeing that as you being the troublemaker, I'm wondering if you reframe that, we often are sensing what other people are feeling, but nobody knows how to say it. Nobody has the courage to say it.
I think that's definitely true some of the time. I think for me, I have so many feelings about everything all the time, and I need to talk about it. And so, and even using the word troublemaker, that's an example of me still being behind my own filter because I'm using negative language. Because you're right, troublemaker is not an appropriate word for that.
Well, it's unkind to you because you
You're
notice
right.
and feel things that other people don't. You know, I can't think of any other term other than the canary in the coal mine, but we do sense and perceive all kinds of things. And I can tell you with the political climate right now, like I'm just wanting to talk about what I'm seeing and feeling. And my husband has COVID political fatigue and really just doesn't want to talk about it. And I have to really have compassion for all the things that he's interested in that I have not been willing to discuss with him. Like I want to get like, how come you don't want to talk about this stuff with me? So I need to find other places where I can do it. And so I'm wondering if in the places where you feel like you're not getting the response that you need, if those people just don't have the capacity, because how you're wired is fine. If you need to talk about all your feelings, that's great. Maybe you're just not around people that have the capacity to hear them all the time. And so, you know, at home, I figure that certain things I'm going to respect where my husband is at, but I need to find other places where I can talk about how I'm feeling about the political things going on, not my feelings.
Sure. I think it gets tough when you're just so emotional and the other person is not, and you get so impassioned with your own feelings and then they don't respond. And then that feels really invalidating. And then I start to doubt myself. Should I have brought this up? And then just the voices in the head start going and I start second guessing myself a lot.
Yeah. I hear, I mean, I really get what you're saying. And I can even say, even with the people that I feel really well matched with, I still have that gremlin. I mean, I was just saying the other night in a polo to someone, like, I feel like I talk too much. I don't talk enough. I'm talking too much about this. I'm not, I polo too much. Like those gremlins are just always there. And so in this relationship, we just name them. Maybe at some point, that won't come up for me. But I really think that it's not a matter of you being too sensitive or having too many feelings. It's always in relationship to the other person. So whoever it is that you're hanging out with has a really different capacity. So that may not be your person to go to with all of your stuff. Maybe it means having other people that you go to with more of your stuff that have that ability to, that love that depth and love that connection and love that.
Yeah. You got to know who to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. I think that we make it about ourselves and it's like it's always in relationship to somebody else. That sense of too much means somebody else just doesn't have the capacity. There's nothing wrong with me. They just don't have the capacity.
Sure. I also think you have to be comfortable enough to take up the space that you need. And I think that's really tough for HSPs because we need more space, but we don't want to take up more space because there's only X amount of space.
Right. You touched on that in one of the questions that you responded to, and I don't remember what the question was, but do you recall the feedback that you gave me around that about having permission to take up space? I think it may have been in relationship to the check-in exercise that we do.
It was in regards to the breathing exercise where you have us take a certain number of breaths and then say to challenge ourselves by taking a couple more and not worrying about coming back to group, last. And I think week after week of experimenting and trying that in a very low demand environment where someone's probably not going to get upset that you do that, that gave me a lot of courage to start doing that in my own life. And shockingly, no one's been upset. They've been like, hey, cool, take the space that you need, which my mind is blown. I could have been doing this all along.
Right. And the way that the exercise goes is we do a meditation at the beginning. You can close your eyes if you want, turn your video on or off. And I kind of guide people through a meditation and then, give them some time to think about what it is that we talked about, then ask them to take a couple deep breaths before they come back to the room and then encourage them to challenge themselves and take up a little bit more space. That as HSPs, we spend so much of our lives trying to figure out what the rule is for the other 80% and how we can fit in. And this group really is about creating space where if you need to get up and eat or you need to turn your video off or you need to step away or you don't want to share, that all those things are okay, that we do such a great job of trying to figure out what everybody wants from us. And we often don't have that sense of, well, what am I needing for myself?
Even just having the environment without the breathing exercise that you invited us to show up however we like, that alone too is very powerful because you have the permission. And I thought, well, I could eat during group if I wanted. Do I want to eat? And just being able to have that conversation instead of these are the rules and you have to follow the rules was really nice and refreshing. And it was a different perspective for me.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. What was unexpected about the group?
I think how emotional I got with other people that I don't know very well. And usually, I mean, I have empathy all the time for everything, but I was really surprised by just how deeply impacted I was by some of the other women.
In a positive or negative way?
I think it was positive. It felt a little bit scary at the time because it was so many feelings about a person I don't know very well. And then that felt a little inappropriate. But it was also because we were in group, I was paying extra attention and able to kind of have an almost out of body experience where I watched myself experience that with another person, but I'm in group. So I'm kind of watching myself have the empathy, but I didn't get caught up in the feelings and so upset and take on those feelings as my own. I didn't do that at all. So it was neat to just experience those feelings without getting sucked into them, because that's tough for me to do. And usually I don't have the awareness, and I do get sucked in.
Is this an accurate reflection that somebody would be sharing something and you had empathy for them? So you had this sense of connection and empathy, but you were able to use mindfulness so that you were able to observe it so that you didn't take on what they were feeling, but you were aware of this emotional connection. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, that's accurate.
Yeah. Did it feel overwhelming? Like, did it feel like there were too many emotions going on, or it was too overwhelming to be in this space?
I don't think so. No, it was kind of a way to have some really intense emotions and experiences without the rest of my life being impacted. Because normally when you have big feelings like that, it's your life and something big is going on. And this was kind of a framed experience with, our 90 minutes that we had. And then it was done, and I was okay. And I wasn't carrying that forward afterwards. I mean, I felt a little bit hungover just from all the feelings, but it was neat to be able to experience that in a more mindful way than I ever have.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I heard you say this, but I'm just imagining people listening like, oh, you felt hungover, like, oh, that feels like that's too much. I don't think I'd want that. Did it feel like it was a satisfying kind of connection, or did it feel like, ooh, this is like just too much?
I would say it was satisfying because you have 6 HSPs together, and there's an intensity and an empathy that I don't think I've ever experienced in any other setting, because I've never been with that many HSPs before. So it was just kind of like we're all on the same, operating at the same wavelength, which I just don't tend to experience very much in my life. So that was really neat. I mean, it was very emotional, mm-hmm. and I admit definitely kind of had a hangover, but the experience of, wow, these people really get it. They get it in a really visceral way that I can't necessarily articulate, was really powerful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think many of us have that opportunity to be with other HSPs in an environment that's contained, and I'd like to believe that it's a safe environment so that y'all can do what you need to do. But if y'all need to be redirected, I'm able to pull you back in. And I don't even know that needed to happen during the course. I don't have a recollection of that. Do you?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. Yeah. What makes this course different than other courses that you've taken?
Other HSP courses or any course?
Well, have you ever taken another HSP course?
No, that's what I was asking. No. Compared to any other course, I think the fact that the HSP as a person comes first is what makes it different, because the goal is to have you live in an HSP space while you're in this group, and you get to do that in a pretty thorough way.
Yeah, so much of what I've noticed with the people that I work with is many of us try and figure out what the rules are, or we're told what the rules are, don't be so emotional. Mm-hmm. So we look outside of ourselves to figure out where we need to operate or navigate from. And I'd say a large part of the work that I do with the HSPs that I work with is to really start getting clear to what's going on internally. What are you feeling? What are you needing? What do you need to say? What's going on for you? And oftentimes we don't know how to tune into ourselves. And so that's a really big focus of the course, is to start getting clear on what's showing up for you. What are you needing? What kind of support are you needing today? How can you show up for you? How can we show up for you? And so really putting that focus back on ourselves. And I think that naturally leads to being clear about setting boundaries and having limits, but it's not necessarily like, I'm going to set a boundary. It's like, oh, wait, this doesn't feel good. What am I needing and thinking? Can you turn that down? That's a little too loud for me. And I really want to focus on what you're hearing, as opposed to, I'm going to set a boundary now.
Right.
Does that resonate for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I think it is so important for us to be able to navigate a space in the way that we need to navigate it. And that's the skill that I was lacking, which led me to the course. But just to be able to look at a situation or a relationship and say, what do I need? And stop and take the time to figure it out. I realized through the course that I am so much more other focused than I realized. I mean, I'm very empathic, so that's part of who I am. But I realized it was at the detriment of what I need and what I want. And so often I don't even know what those things are.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, that often how we learn to have our sense of connection is by figuring out what others need. And we're really good at figuring out what other people need. And that gives us that sense of connection and takes away that fear of being too much and too needy because we're meeting somebody's need. So that's often how we get our sense of esteem. And it's problematic because then it can be hard for us to have wants and needs, or to ask for help, or to need things that can go back to childhood emotional neglect, or the dynamics that we grew up with if our parents were overwhelmed and, they needed help and we were really good at helping them. And so we carry those dynamics into our other relationships, or we get feedback that, we're too much or we're too sensitive. And so we figure out how to get our needs met in a way that doesn't meet our needs, but we get that sense of connection. And so learning how to change those patterns and really show up for ourselves, that's something not a lot of people have experienced. I see you nodding your head.
Yes, there was something that you said in one of the podcasts, and I don't recall which one, but I emailed you about it. And it was when you were talking about the young HSP child who was looking for connections, and they find connections by helping people. And then that becomes the main way you connect, which was like, stop talking about me on your podcast, Patricia. That's so me. That's huge for me.
Well, and it's one of those things that I see it as being really adaptive, that if we have a need to connect and we can't connect over our needs, but we can connect over somebody else's needs, it's very adaptive. It's a healthy way of getting our need met in a way that we can under the circumstances. And it just later on, like, how is that working for us? And I can say in my profession and field, I love connecting, and sometimes it's really hard for me to ask for my own needs and wants, and I don't like that. And that kind of goes back to my childhood emotional neglect. And I'm supposed to have needs. I'm supposed to ask for help. I'm not supposed to know how to do things by myself. So it's an ongoing work in progress. But I think being able to name the process and what's going on is part of what makes it more manageable.
Definitely. The course gave me a lot of language and concepts to be able to say concretely, okay, that's what that is. That's my perfectionism showing up, and being able to identify, and then I can deal with it once I know what it is.
Yeah, I think that when we're in it, and again, it's just interesting. I often see themes that come up week to week with the people that I'm working with, that often when we're in it, we just don't understand what's going on, and being able to know kind of what the roadmap is. Like, oh, this happened and you got flooded. And so you went into anger because that was the easiest thing to do. And then what was underneath the anger? Oh, there was fear and vulnerability. Where does this show up for you? That sometimes when we recognize, like, oh, I'm doing that thing again, it kind of takes us out of the muck, and we're able to pull back a little bit, what I call mindfulness, to go like, oh, this is that loop that I go into again. And when we can see that that's what's going on, we don't feel like we're stuck in this experience and it's happening to us, but we can pull back.
Very much so. I find that I'm developing a playbook of how I do and how I react and feel in certain situations. And as I learn that, when I find myself in those situations again, I can say, okay, what happened last time? I got through it. I did okay. This is what I did. This is why I feel like doing this particular thing right now, because I did it last time. And it gives me confidence to get through the situation without struggling as much. And also that it's going to end. Because for me, when I'm in the really big feelings, it is that way forever. And I know that's not true. Cognitively, I know that's not true. But it really feels like this is it. This is it forever.
Right. Well, and what I find is that when I'm having very, very intense feelings, it's like the mind wants to make up a story. And so that's when I pull into, and another thing that happened, I pull out every injustice in my life that validates feeling this way. And I really think that comes from not having it be okay to have anger, frustration, disappointment. And so like I have to justify, if, I'm using air quotes, I have to justify the feelings as opposed to like, I can feel all of those feelings even over the slightest thing. And if that's what I'm feeling, that's what I'm feeling. And if I make room for it, then it will come and go and it will shift and change. But I don't think we have that experience. And so we often use intellectual evidence to justify why we're having strong feelings because we don't know what it's like to go like, yeah, I'm having some really big feels right now and it's really uncomfortable.
There's no modeling of that anywhere. Because I'd have found it if there was.
Yeah, my intention for the course is like you have a toolbox and I'm just going to give you more tools. And so one day you may pull this tool out and it works and then the next time it doesn't. So you go like, oh, let me look for another tool. It's not that it's going to solve or fix or take away challenges, but when they do come up, which is part of being a human, if you're going to be alive, you're going to have struggles, you're going to have joys. You've got a full toolbox and you get to kind of rummage through and see what works on that day.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a whole notebook of notes from podcasts and from the groups and then from the exercises and the homework. And I am going to page through there and find the nuggets and save them somewhere else. I have a document that I save all of my, like the really good articles I read about coping with this or dealing with that. I just have a huge document. And so I'm going to go through there and find all the things that just really, really hit home for me so that I can review them later.
See, I take copious notes and then I never look at them again. So it's not really helpful. Mm-mm. Good on you. I mean, I did get a master's degree, so I must know how to do something right and retain information. But I find that, I do take notes, but I rarely will go back and look at them. So, and what I know is we often absorb so much more information. And so we all have different learning styles. So anyways, did you feel seen and honored in the course?
Very much so. The way that it's structured where we can show up however we need to show up is part of what was just a neat experience, that it really was okay to eat or drink or turn the video off or whatever. That was just a neat experience to have.
Yeah. And this was a place where I got feedback from you. We talked about this before we started recording, and I had to ask you for what the term was because I'm just learning. But this is where my heteronormative privilege showed up. And I can't remember exactly what it was, but I made a comment maybe about your partner or about your marriage or something, and you corrected me. Do you want to fill in the rest of the story?
Sure. I believe you asked me if I encountered something with a partner, and I let you know that I had two partners.
Yeah. And so my response was, gosh, I can see where my privilege just showed up and I made an assumption without even knowing, and I'm really sorry. And we moved on because the focus wasn't on that, but like, I'm just starting to see how much my privilege shows up all over the place. And the feedback that you sent me was, do you want to tell me what your feedback was about that?
Yeah, it was a really neat experience. I am polyamorous and have been this way for, goodness, almost 20 years. So I'm used to being the weirdo in the room. I'm used to being the girl with two partners, and I'm just kind of the odd one out. And you normalized it by calling it a monogamy bias. And I have literally never, ever had that experience. So it was just kind of put me in a place of like, oh, I'm not weird. It's just different. And I'm okay with the weirdness. I have lots of weird things about me, and I love weird. But I'm just used to being kind of separate for that reason. And you just kind of said, nope, not separate. Put me right back in with everybody else, which was just neat. I really was touched by that.
Thank you. And I'm just seeing how much I had a client who came to me for HSP issues and is also non-binary. And as we began to work together, my limitations around working with someone who's non-binary became painfully evident. And we spent a few sessions where I just needed to keep doing repair work. But I really got to see how biased and gendered my language is. I would talk about girlfriends, or the client said something and I'd say, amen, sister. That's gendered language. And it turned out that it really ended up not being supportive of the client. And we had very open discussions about this, and they made the decision, and I supported them, that it was, which is more important to work on right now, your HS traits or around these little microaggressions that keep coming up on my part unintentionally. because I'm learning and I've been using this gendered language for all of my life. And as much as I want to change it, it's just going to take time. And I'm having more and more awarenesses. And so the client made the decision that they really wanted to work with somebody that had experience in the area and could support them in their experiences. And I don't know what it's like to be non-binary. I don't know what it's like to live in a world that's incredibly gendered, and then to have a safe place where you want your coach or your therapist to really be able to see and hear you. And then there are microaggressions, obviously unintentional, not what I planned. And so it's just really opened my eyes to see how many biases and where my racism shows up, and just trying to do better. And, it's a process. What can I say?
I think this year has been a demonstration for many of us that we have racism and biases that we don't even know about.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that we're talking about it and we're looking at it and that we can do better. And for those of us that have these beliefs or ways of speaking or believing for all of our lives, I have beautiful intentions and I just keep misstepping, and all I can do is keep practicing and doing it imperfectly and to do the least amount of harm possible, which in this case with the client, that I did not want to create more harm than safety. And that's really what was happening.
I think we're having to relabel a lot of things right now. And I think we're relabeling them correctly, but it takes a long time for language to catch up. And particularly if you've been on this planet for a little while and things just weren't that way, and that's not what you learned, it's really, really difficult. I struggle with the same things.
Yeah. I just think the best that we can do is to increase our awareness and try and do it imperfectly, and to be really humble. And I think the most challenging thing is to just go, you're right, I'm sorry, and to not go into the defensiveness around it. It's like, you're right, I'm sorry.
I have a friend who is non-binary, and I am always so worried about saying she instead of they. And I talked to them about it once, and they said, you are trying. That's all I'm asking for. So I felt a lot better, because it's not my intention to hurt anyone's feelings or to be disrespectful, but sometimes words just come out.
Right.
And they were so kind and loving about it. It made me feel better that even if I don't get it right, they see that I'm making the effort.
Right. And what I think is really important, that we tend to be so perfectionistic that we don't want to do it wrong. So we don't want to try, and we don't want to make the mistake. Better to just know that you've got great intentions and go out there and do it. And if you make a mistake, you go, I'm sorry. How can I fix this? How can I make it right? Yeah. Yeah. What is a takeaway from the course?
Oh my goodness, there's so many.
That was a very poor transition, by the way. I just want to name that. My taskmaster. Let's go back to the questions.
You turned and did not put your blinker on.
I did not. I do that frequently.
There's a lot of takeaways. And like you said, I'm still processing a lot of the things, and it's still taking a while to, kind of sink in, and I need to go back and review a lot of it. But one of the things that comes to mind is the identification of my perfectionism. I would probably not have identified myself as a perfectionist before this course. And in taking it, it's like, oh yeah, that's where you are. It's very familiar.
What did you see that showed up for you? If you didn't identify as a perfectionist, what was it that you went like, oh, that's perfectionism?
Well, I just thought I was doing it right.
I
was just doing it correctly. And it's like, no, it wasn't just that. It's always a few steps beyond that where the perfectionism shows up. But I never saw that. I'm like, I'm doing the job that you asked me to do, not realizing that, I was upsetting myself, worrying about whether or not I was doing a good job, whether or not it would work out like I wanted it to. And it was difficult to see until it was laid out in front of me. And I can say, oh, okay, yeah, that's where it's going off the rails.
Was there a belief on some level that to be, I don't know what the fill in the blank is, a good person, an honorary person, a valued person, whatever that is, I have to do everything exactly correct. And that's what kind of keeps me safe?
Yes, this is why I am upset. There is not a manual for how to be a person. It's because I want to follow the rules. I want the directions. I'm going to refer back to it repeatedly like a recipe.
Yeah. I think a lot of us have that. And well, so let's talk about it. So what do you do now if you know that you're not hitting those marks? What do you tell yourself?
Somebody, a very wise person once said, done is better than perfect.
I don't know where I heard that. That's not original. I got it from somewhere, so I can't claim full for it. So are you able to pull that in when you kind of recognize that, gotta get it, gotta get it, gotta get it?
Yes, I'm able to see it. And sometimes I decide, no, I want to keep going and I really want this thing to be perfect, but it's a choice.
Yeah.
Now it's much more of a choice than it used to be. I can pull back and say, my effort here isn't worth it, and I'm going to walk away from it the way it is. But other times I can see if it's, an artistic thing or something that I really want to have a certain aesthetic, then I can let myself go that extra mile to maybe wend into perfectionism. But I'm kind of okay with that because I'm going after a specific aesthetic or art or whatever. But for kind of everyday stuff, that's not useful. So it's nice to be able to step back from it.
Do you find some freedom in that? I mean, my guess is there's still some tension, that whole like, oh, this isn't gonna. Do you have that battle, and then how do you get yourself out of that?
Yes, I think I'm still figuring out how to get myself out of that. I really struggle a lot with that with art. I've gotten a whole lot into art since COVID. I was doing it before, but since I can't go anywhere, I've been doing a lot more. And noticing a lot of creative blocks tied to perfectionism.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when, my husband's like, just start doing something. And I'm like, no, but I need to have a plan. I need to have this. It needs to go like this. And I'm learning to stop that and say, let's just start working on something and not worry about what it's going to turn into.
Yeah. I just said something like one of those, like, oh, there's something else I need to look at. We're going to put that away for today.
What was that?
Where my perfectionism around creating comes up, and then I get really overwhelmed and I don't know where to start. I tend to be pretty meticulous in my creativity, that, I feel like with words in the podcast, I feel like I've really embraced just show up and get the thing done. And around creating, like I am like, oh, yay, a COVID treat, another thing to look at. Not today. We're going to put that one aside. Yes,
I very much relate to that. I have been writing for a long time, so that's super easy. That comes really easy for me as well. It's the actually creating art or a craft or creating an actual tangible thing that my stress gets to me. The perfectionism, it gets really tough.
Yeah. And it's not uncommon that we master something in one or two areas, and then there's another area where like we just haven't been able to take that skill and put it into this other area. So yay. If someone I'm turning on my blinker. Do I need to turn on my blinker?
Okay. Thank you. No, you're good. Thank you.
I have to say that when my HS clients will always apologize. Like, I know I'm all over the place, and I totally track. Like, I just know that's how our brains go. And I have a coach that I work with, Melissa, and we were working together the other day, and I said, like, I know I'm all over the place. So it's interesting that we have that self-judgment that we're not being very linear, but I think that we just absorb so much that we've got all this stuff, and like it makes sense, like there is no transition, but it makes sense because my brain is going like ping, 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 ping. So yeah.
I try to let my family know that I'm turning on my blinker, so that they know, whoop, we're going over here now. And that helps a little bit.
Or sometimes I start with a very detailed story, and what I need to do is to give what the topic is. The topic is, concerns about finances. But I'm going to start out telling you 3 stories that you're not going to understand why they're related. But in my mind, it totally makes sense.
Yep. So familiar.
I think sometimes our brains are just on hyperdrive, and we pick up so much information that it makes sense to us, but other people just don't track it because it's not linear. And maybe that's where that belief or expectation is, that we should be linear. But I think that's why we see so many solutions to problems, and we're able to think outside the box, because our brains really are, constantly pinging, just gathering information and seeing things that other people don't.
I wish there was a map that I could hand a non-HSP person and say, this is what it looks like in here. So they would understand and go, oh, yeah, no problem. Whatever you need. That would be so helpful.
I've seen a GIF that is a brain, and it says my daytime brain and then my nighttime brain. And the nighttime brain is, lit up and it's pinging all over the place. And it's kind of, you can take that and adapt it. Like, this is my HSP brain. So picking up all kinds of stuff. If someone is considering taking the course, what would you tell them? Here's what I imagine. And this is kind of my train of thought. Like, I've taken courses before, like I've spent money. They're not that great. It's a lot of money. Why would I want to take it? What's special about this one? What would you say to them?
This course, and again, we'll clarify, I have taken no other HSP courses. But this course, I think, it is written for HSPs by HSPs, and that's really obvious. As soon as you start, getting the videos that you send out ahead of time and you start getting a feel for things, it's really obvious that this is for you. The person reading it, me, this is for me, and I can do this experience however I want. And most courses, you don't have that kind of flexibility, and it starts with that. And then, you can take the time that you need with the meditation, and there's just repeated opportunities for you to be able to take time and have it be okay. And that's a really incredible experience, especially for somebody who I think feels burdened by the HSP, which I do. That was a really valuable experience.
Yeah, even during the course, one of the participants was taking this online learning experience and was feeling like it just wasn't working for them. And part of what we talked about is it's not you, it's the structure of the course. And the structure of the course is not flexible to really meet the individual needs of people. And I think so often this happens that the world, the 80% of the world is not set up to honor our needs. And so we just constantly bump up against this feeling of like, how come this isn't working for me? How come I'm uncomfortable? How come I'm the only one saying something? And it's not us, it's that we're in the minority, and that the way that things are set up are not often set up to honor what we need. And we think there's something wrong with us. So when we can identify that and then get clear on what we're needing and then name it and see if we can't get that, I think that's a real game changer. It's not a one and done, but I think having that awareness really shifts to what's wrong with me to like, oh, this isn't set up to honor my needs.
And when you are in a place that honors your needs, like the group, it helps you leapfrog that knowledge to your life. And how do I apply that to what I'm doing and how I'm living? How do I do that? So that experience gives you confidence that, okay, I can do it in this context of this group. What changes can I make to my life that aren't too scary and too threatening, but where I can start taking up more space? And then you can do that. That works out okay. And you can take up more space. So it's neat the way you can practice it within the group, and it's pretty safe. And then you can kind of start to apply those things to your regular life.
Yeah, I think it really gives people an opportunity to have the experience of what it's like to be in a healthy, functional environment where people's needs are honored and seen and heard, and that feedback is welcome, reality checks are welcome. That I'm just starting to see how much in my relationships when I give feedback, even by some other therapists, that because of their own shame or wounding, that they come back a little bit on the defensive side, and that I haven't been able to go like, oh, that was a defensive response. Like you're making it about me, or, comments about like, I feel like I can't, no matter what I do, you're going to be unhappy. Or I've had people tell me like, you keep track of things, you keep track of injuries. And it's like, I realized, well, yeah, of course I do. Because when I tell you that I'm not feeling seen and heard, it kind of goes unnoticed, and like that hurts. And so I feel like I'm getting into a little bit of messy territory here, but I think that we can have healthy relationships, and there can still be ways that people respond to us that are not, we don't feel seen and heard. And so knowing what that feels like and having that experience. So then when we kind of go back in the world and somebody responds in another way, we go like, wait, I've experienced this different before. This doesn't feel good. But if we haven't experienced what it's like to be able to come up against somebody and them not to get angry and to have compassion and to see us, then we go like, oh, this is possible. I want more of this. And then we recognize when it doesn't happen. I don't know how clearly that came out. I feel like I got a little jumbled in my head.
I think I understood what you mean. The class and you have given me a lot of language, like giving me the words to say when I don't know how to express myself. So one of the things that I've been saying a lot is what's coming up for me is blah, blah, blah. I'm noticing that blah, blah, blah. But just being able to have those words, and I don't know, it's almost like naming them is removing a lot of the emotion, and then I can kind of work with it a little bit better. So it's more like in front of me instead of in me, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. That to me is what mindfulness is if I'm in the experience, I'm so identified with it that I don't see it because I'm just in it. And once I can name it,
yes,
I'm able to remove myself from being in the experience to talking about the experience. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling disconnected. I'm not feeling seen. That creates some distance. And then we get a little bit more of a sense of empowerment. And when we can do that, that is so incredibly powerful, as opposed to like, this is how life is, to like, oh, I'm feeling really low today and I'm feeling disconnected. that changes the energy tremendously. It doesn't seem like it would, but that's really powerful.
It really is being able to voice your truth and where you are with something. And even just to say that isn't feeling good, that was really hard for me to say before, but it's becoming a lot more comfortable because I know I'm not saying anything bad about the other person. I know if they respond defensively, that's okay, but it may be their own stuff, that I'm not causing that. So being able to have that language, I think, has given me a lot of room in all of my relationships.
Right, right. We're coming to a winding down point. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about or anything that you feel that is important to share before we wrap up?
You asked me, I think we talked about it a little bit before or maybe possibly yesterday, but you asked me if I thought the group would be as effective just as videos without doing the actual group work. And I've been thinking about that a little bit more. And I really strongly think that the group experience is roughly half probably of the entire course, because you're not only reading the material, but then you're processing it and you're seeing how other people show up with perfectionism or doubt or, any of the things that we struggle with. It's nice to be able to see, this is what this looks like on this person. This is what this looks like on this person. And just having cogent, tangible examples of how other people are dealing with it was amazing. It was really amazing.
Thanks. It's interesting that when Jen and I made the videos, it was for the course. And then I thought about separating them out and wasn't going to do that. And really what I still would like to do, and I just have to find a platform where I can do it, is I would like to offer just the videos and the prompts and the links for people that aren't ready for the coursework. Because I can tell you, there are people that are not, they just haven't done enough work and they're not really ready for the level of experience of what it's like to show up in a group with other people. And I think it would be a great starting place, because I think the information in the videos is really helpful. And like you said, when people are ready to jump in and do the work, then I think the benefit really is, the gift comes from being with other HSPs, other people that are wired like you. But I mean, you had a pretty diverse group. Not everybody had the same level of awareness, the same experiences, the same level of communication. One person decided the group wasn't working for them and they decided to leave the group. And there were still some incredibly sweet connections that happened. And so, I never know who's going to be joining the group and how cohesive it is, but there were some pretty sweet connections that were made. I mean, do you want to say anything about that?
I have been really surprised and appreciative of the friendships that have come out of this group. It's a strange experience to get so emotionally close with people, and you don't know what their house looks like. You don't know what their partner looks like. You don't know a lot of just basic real world details. So that's a little bit weird. With a couple of the gals I've connected with, we're kind of filling in those gaps now. So it's kind of a friendship that's happened in reverse. But it's been really neat to kind of have my HSP group to bounce ideas off or to vent, or just to have someone say, "Oh my gosh, I know." That's amazing to have.
Yeah, definitely. There've been some really sweet ways that y'all have connected, and it always makes my heart happy to know that those connections happen. Sometimes they happen in groups and sometimes they don't. Usually there's one person is the one that kind of initiates the, hey, let's, depending on what medium y'all decide to connect over, but it's usually one person who initiates it, and then it works for some people and not for everybody. And, that's also okay too.
Yeah, we had one person that initiated it this time as well.
Yeah, yeah. I bet I know who that is. We'll talk about that when we stop recording. We've kind of hit a stopping point. Is there anything else before we end, Cal?
I don't think so. I want to thank you for asking me, and it was a fun experience.
Yeah, I loved having you in group. I love the Mad Lady Balls. I think that it's going to stay with me for forever. And every time you and I correspond, I always sign MLB. I don't do that with everybody, but I do reserve that just for you. And I do have some Mad Lady Balls. I mean, to me, that's really about courage and vulnerability and strength. And that's really what I think sensitivity is often viewed as a weakness. A lot of us tend to be criers. We apologize. We've got big feelings. And I also know that we can be incredibly strong and resilient and gutsy. And it takes so much courage to allow people to see to see us and to see who we are. And I think that's why the Mad Lady Balls just really, it makes me smile, but it's also about courage and bravery. And I think that's a big part of our sensitivity when we embrace it and we don't feel like we need to hide it or cover it up.
Yes. Underneath these tears are some Mad Lady Balls.
Yeah. And on that, I think we will end with Mad Lady Balls. Thanks for being here today, Kel. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye. Hey again. So I'm curious to know what you thought of the episode. If you're interested in taking the online HSP course, you can go to my website, unapologeticallysensitive.com, and go to the HSP groups page. If you scroll down, the times and days that I'm going to be offering courses are there. There's a registration page. As soon as we get enough people signed up, my plan is to try and run 3 groups. And if you've listened to previous episodes, I'm very unclear about how many groups I've run and how many times I've run them. My brain just doesn't take time and dates unless I go and dig for it. So I went and dug for it. This is going to be the 5th round of courses that I'm teaching. I've run 4 previous rounds and I've run anywhere from 1 to 4 groups at a time. So this will be the 10th group that I'm running. I honestly believe that these are incredibly powerful groups. And if you've never been around other HSPs in a safe, contained environment, really having a chance to see what healthy communication is and being modeled. I can tell you that we've had some groups where we've had some bumps or somebody in the group has had some wounding or some healing. This is across the board, so I'm not pointing to any specific group. And we've been able to work on that as a group about how did that impact people, what came up. I think sometimes those are the most healing things when there's something specific that we can address. That is not the intention of the group, but sometimes somebody has dropped the group and we've needed to talk about how does that impact people and try and get some closure in. I really just do think that these courses are incredibly powerful. If by the time you hear this and it's past time, this is going to be airing, I think in the end of August, beginning of September 2020. I used to do big launches, but because with COVID, we just don't know what's happening. I just kind of wait until I have enough people that are interested for a course, and then I run one. My brain is really tired today. I don't feel like I'm functioning at my best, and my gremlins are already up about the intro. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I think that's pretty much it. I really hope that you're doing well right now, that you're managing. I don't know about you, but I am talking to people, and the ongoing stress with the upcoming elections, if you're in the States, hopefully people are feeling pretty hopeful depending on where you're leaning politically. I haven't decided if I want to get into politics or not on this podcast. I have very, very, very strong feelings. Yeah, I hope you're doing well. We're just doing the best that we can. And I think that's it. This is what you get with 5-6 months of COVID. All right. I hope you're well and taking care of yourself. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.